Welcome to Lesson 2. Today we'll be talking about commercial lead generation and project qualification. Today's objectives will include what types of properties to target, why you might want to consider partnerships with local service providers, and what the commercial solar sales process looks like. In our very first video, I covered some examples of types of properties to target when looking for potential solar candidates. I've added a few more to review with you. So office buildings are great as long as you have a relationship with the building owner. If you meet with a business owner who leases their office space, chances are they will need to get sign off from the building owner, and that can always introduce more time and potentially add more complexities to your sale, but it's not a big deal. It's just always good practice to know who owns the building. The same applies to retail spaces. We try to avoid the big box stores, even though it's tempting, unless they are local to your area. If you happen to have a relationship with a key decision maker, then that is something you might want to go ahead and entertain. And I mention this only because you would likely need corporate approval, and trying to get corporate approval for a project can be extremely time consuming. So just if you happen to have a relationship, it might be good to speak with them about it and maybe try to understand the process of, who makes the key decisions for that particular property. Manufacturing plants are fantastic candidates for solar. They are high energy users and would most definitely benefit from installing solar if they're interested in implementing energy efficiency measures. Data centers are also high energy users and are great candidates for solar, as well as distribution centers and warehouses, and they usually have fantastic rooftops for solar installations. You might also want to consider convention centers and storage facilities. Those are great options to look at as well. Storage businesses usually have multiple roofs. Some are climate controlled, which I've mentioned in a previous video, and that makes solar even more lucrative for those particular business owners. And if you happen to be in a more rural area, commercial agriculture is another option. For example, we currently have a project that's being built on a chicken farm here in the southeast. You also want to reach into your Rolodex of people that you have done business with in the past. If you're already in contact with them, it's going to be much easier for you to start the solar conversation. Having relationships with building owners, facilities managers, or other key decision makers within a company is pivotal to growing your solar business. Solar's now at a point in history where it makes good business and financial sense to invest. Um, Another piece of advice is to be cognizant that if you're canvassing and introducing yourself to the building owner or the point of contact in a cold call, or if you just go knock on their door, just understand that it could take up to 7 to 10 meetings or detailed discussions before they could decide that they want to move forward with a solar project. So next, I want to move into what some of the required characteristics are for commercial solar projects. So there are certain characteristics to look for when prospecting for your next commercial solar project. First of all, we want to make sure that there is at least 30 kW potential for the property. So let's take a look at what a 30 kW looks like on a rooftop. So you can see here that this is what a 30 kW looks like. This was a commercial project that our team collaborated on for an electrical contractor's corporate headquarters here in Nashville, Tennessee. So when looking at potential properties for solar, this gives you an idea of what the approximate size of a 30 kW looks like. Not all commercial properties are going to have enough room for this many panels, but ground mounts or carports are always an option as long as there's ample parking spaces or if there's a lot of land that our designers have to work with. So next you'll want to make sure that there's limited shading on the property. The shade is our enemy in solar, so the less shading, the better production. So let's take a look at an example where shading will be an issue. So this is an office building that houses a news organization. And you can see that there are trees that are lining the south-facing part of the roof and part of the western part of the roof. It looks like there might be some room here on the east side of the building for some panels, but because the majority of the building is covered in trees, this location is not ideal for solar. Also, if you have a client whose building is located in a downtown or a metropolitan area, be cognizant of the taller buildings that are surrounding the property. You can see how in this example, the building that's outlined in yellow, which happens to be a church, is completely shaded by the taller building to the west. Now it can be deceiving because if you happen to visit the site, you happen to visit this property in the morning hours, you will see the sun hitting the roof. But you would need to keep in mind that as the sun sets in the west, as the day progresses, the church won't be able to maximize its solar production after 12 p.m. So now that we've taken a look at a few properties that are not so great for solar, let's take a look at what would be a good property for solar. So these are examples of storage units, which are great candidates for solar installations. They've got nice rooftops. You can see there are no obstructions. They have no shading, and they have southern-facing rooftops. Another characteristic you need to look for is a large roof with limited obstructions. This means you have to know, are there HVAC units on the roof? Are there skylights? What about parapets? There are several reasons why this property is not ideal for rooftop solar. You'll notice all the rooftop units here on the top of the building. You can see here and as well over on this side of the roof. These are a huge hurdle to deal with when looking at such a small space. You'll also notice the shading that's here on the south-facing part of the roof, and that's from this parapet that's here on the side of the building. A parapet is like a protective wall that's against the edge of the roof. So there's nothing that we can do about that shading factor because it's just part of the building's design. But let's take a look at this beautiful roof for solar. There's minimal obstructions. The roof is large enough for our design team to work around the small obstructions that we do see here on the roof. Google Earth can only tell us so much, so if you know that our design team needs to be aware of any rooftop units or any other types of obstructions on the roof, be sure to include that information when you upload your project. That's one of the reasons why we incorporated the photo and video feature. Now, of course, we don't expect you to get up on the roof, but you can actually just speak to the business owner, the building owner, and they'll be able to tell you that information. Another option you can look for when you're looking at a property for solar is how much surrounding land that they own for a potential ground mount system. So this property, which we actually just looked at, also has a lot of land for a potential ground mount installation. And while it has a fantastic roof for solar, there may be some reason that the owner wants to instead install a ground mount system. They have the land to do it, as I've pointed out in the red box at the top of the screen, and our design team can easily design a ground mount array for this property. This is an example of a ground mount system built at a manufacturing plant in Tennessee. This part of the customer's property is actually considered a brownfield, which according to the EPA is a property that may be complicated by the presence or the potential presence of a hazardous substance or some sort of contaminant. So rather than installing solar on their rooftop, the company decided they wanted to reinvest in their empty ground space that they couldn't do anything with, that they just decided we'll go ahead and install our solar array on that ground. I want to touch briefly on the power of partnerships. You might want to think about reaching out to some of your local service providers and offering to be their go-to solar consultant. Think of some of the commercial roofers or the commercial electrical contractors, maybe HVAC contractors, or any kind of all-encompassing service provider that caters to commercial and industrial properties. A lot of these contractors might have service contracts with their clients, and they might have customers asking them about solar. If they're offering or installing energy efficient products for their customers, maybe they have customers asking them for advice on solar. While they might not be the solar experts, and chances are they don't know anything about solar, offer to help them. Offer to visit the site if they have a customer who is interested in solar. I'd like to go ahead and move into the commercial solar sales process and how it works through the solar site design platform. Okay, first you're going to identify the location and the customer for the potential solar project. Next, you'll upload the details about the project using the Solar Site Design app or by logging into solarsitedesign.com and uploading it through your dashboard. What happens next is within the next 5 business days, if not sooner, our design team builds out a complete feasibility design and a complete working model for you to present to your client. After that, we engage our finance and installation teams through our marketplace platform. Now, our marketplace platform ensures that the highest qualified finance companies and installers are competitive, and they're going to work to make sure that the pricing we've placed on the working model meets or exceeds that expectation. Our goal in the solar industry is to continue driving down the cost of solar, and so that is why our marketplace is a huge part of the commercial solar sales process. We're taking control and making sure that your client is going to get the best price. And finally, to sell your project, collaborate with the installer and the finance company to sell the solar project to your client. In selling commercial solar projects, you have to be involved in the process from the time that you upload your project to the time that your customer places their deposit with the chosen installer. So once your client signs off on the construction contract and they pay their initial deposit with a selected installation company, that's when crew gets paid. So make sure to stay active and involved with every project that you upload. And keep in mind that how much time and effort that you invest in this upfront will make all the difference in how big your pockets are once you get your deals signed. So here are a few considerations to be mindful of throughout the commercial solar sales process. Um, Commercial solar sales projects typically have a longer sales cycle than residential projects. Now we're talking anywhere from at least 6 to 9 months and sometimes even longer. In many cases, the bigger the system, the longer it takes to sell. But you need to remember that the payout is a much larger sum. And sometimes what contributes to the longer sales cycle is, there might be multiple decision makers involved. The more people that have to approve the project, the longer it's going to take. For instance, in our experience, sometimes there needs to be a board decision on whether or not the project moves forward. And let's say the board only meets once a month, so oftentimes they ask you to wait until after the meeting. It all adds up over time, and so the key here is to remain patient yet diligent with your follow-ups. And let's say that they have the perfect facility for solar. They could benefit by installing solar, but their budget and timing just might not be right. They might not have the extra money in their budget, at this point to pursue a solar project this particular fiscal year. They might have something that pops up an emergency type of project that needs to be taken care of first. If their fiscal year just started, then you'll need to just put that project in your follow-up file for the following year. Those are just a few considerations to be mindful of. And like I said, being patient with your clients is key. And just keep in mind that you're building your pipeline of interested customers. And although they might not be ready right now, Be sure to stay in touch with them and remind them of how they'll benefit from installing solar. The key here is your follow-up and in being proactive with them. It's all about nurturing your leads. This leads me to my last consideration, which is being collaborative and proactive. Through the Solar Site Design Marketplace, you're going to receive up to 5 installation quotes for your project. Be collaborative with the chosen installer. You're going to learn so much from them, and they're going to help you sell the project. So be proactive in visiting the site with them when they do their final site survey at your client's property. The best way to learn and be successful in this industry is by staying actively involved. You don't need to be a solar expert. Let the installer discuss all the technicalities with your customer. They do this every day. And be sure to listen in and take notes when they do talk to your customer about technicalities. So that covers today's module, and I really appreciate your attention today. We hope to see you in the next module, which covers solar design options.